Original post, April 27, 2024. Obviously throwaway, I don't need anyone here seeing my regular account. Also, I'm in the US and English is my first language, any discrepancies are because I suck at typing on my phone. Context, I'm 28 female, my childhood best friend we'll call Jess is also 28. To put it simply, I don't think I'm any kind of prude, I just don't really feel comfortable with casual sex, never have. My best friend knows this and has teased me about it lightly in the past. She's been in a long-term relationship for the last 3 years, and I've mostly been single while working on my degree and starting my career. Jess lives in another state with her boyfriend, so we don't hang out much anymore. So about a month ago I had a first date with a guy I'd been talking to for a bit, thought it was going places, but he gave a weird vibe on the date and I cut and ran early. On my way home I stopped at a local pub, figured I'd have a drink to unwind and people watch till it wore off. I get there and it's pretty packed, Friday night and all, and there was no seating room at the bar. Took my drink and looked around, most of the restaurant side of the pub was someone's birthday party, but there was a small table with a seat open off to the side, with a guy reading a book there. So I say screw it, I'm a social person and what's the worst thing that happens? He says no? So I ask if I can sit there for a bit, I promise we don't have to talk or anything. At this point, I feel like I've fucked up because this guy up close is the hottest man I have ever seen. But he just smiled at me and gave an enthusiastic, sure. A few minutes later of me sipping in silence and he says, I don't mind talking, if you want to. We talk for a bit and it turns out Mike is 29, just finished his master's degree in some kind of computer learning field and he's living on his own for the first time. He apparently stops by the pub after work because he's right around the corner, and he's not used to the silence yet after living so long with a half-dozen siblings. We talked for a good 2 hours, about everything from dating, which he said he's basically given up on, to hobbies and tastes, and we have a near total eclipse of a Venn diagram on this stuff. I eventually sort of blurted out that I don't know why he'd give up on dating, this is the closest thing I've had to a good date in forever. Shooting my shot obliquely here lol. He gets kind of an odd look on his face and says, tell you what, I have to go to the bathroom, but when I come back I'll ask you out for real. Weird, but okay. Then it all clicks, because he doesn't get up to walk away, he just rolls in his wheelchair. And I'm thinking, oh my god, he wanted to give me a chance to back out of this without making it awkward. How cute can this guy be? He grinned like crazy when he got back and saw I was still there, and I basically tripped over myself saying something to the effect of, so I'm free all weekend, what did you have in mind? Another hour later, we've got plans for Saturday, and he told me he has a neuromuscular disorder I can't remember the name of, so his legs work, but the signals from his brain get misinterpreted, so he doesn't have the balance or coordination for walking or standing. The pub starts switching over to the younger rowdier crowd, and he asks if I'd like to go back to his place for coffee to continue our conversation. As you have probably long since realized, I did not get any coffee or conversation till the next morning, and I have zero regrets. We've been dating since, and I know it's still early but I really feel like this might be the one. Onward to yesterday afternoon, my friend Jess is in town, and we go out for coffee to catch up on things. I'm gushing about Mike, but when I get to how we met she just sort of got weird and edgy. I don't remember any exact words, but she essentially said that I must have a fetish for the handicapped since I broke my #1 rule and it's the best physical relationship I've ever been in. Like it's good for me because he uses a wheelchair, not because the guy puts in effort in bed? She said I've changed as a person, and left without even saying goodbye. 15 years of friendship and I've never seen her like that. So here I am, asking the most objective people online, if I'm an asshole or weird for being super attracted to a guy who uses a wheelchair and basically putting out immediately. Update 1, April 29, 2024. So if you were hoping for some terrible drama, I hate to break it to you that I don't roll like that. No pun intended. So I do have an update on Jess and it finally makes perfect sense. And I have a slightly NSFW but funny story about Mike, because this guy is just the best, y'all. Okay, so first, I finally messaged Jess yesterday and said basically, I'm still hurt by what you said, but after 15 years of friendship, I'd never forgive myself if I didn't at least ask why you snapped at me like that. She replied immediately, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean any of that, can we have a do-over on lunch? So I agreed cautiously and took a half day to meet with her today. Turns out that those of you who said she was jealous, and that she might have something else going on, and especially the person who said something might be going on in her relationship, gold stars. She's in town because she's job hunting, because she's moving back in with her parents for a while since her relationship ended. Apparently, they have been having a ton of small problems adding up, But the biggest one? Sex. The guy she's been with was apparently never great, but it's gotten to the point where he makes no effort at all for her to enjoy herself and then gets pissed when she isn't in the mood. She tried talking with him about it, making suggestions, but he told her recently that it's emasculating being given sex advice by a woman. The straw that broke the metaphorical camel's back, however, was that her boyfriend has always had a thing for Asian women. She's Caucasian, but she does have long black hair. After weeks of fighting over their sex life, he suggested that they spice things up by her dressing in a kimono and pretending to be Asian. She lost it on him and is absolutely disgusted by the racist fetishism and ended it right then. So she had all of this bottled up and was hoping to talk to me and finally be able to put it down, and I missed every hint that she had something big to discuss because I was gushing about Mike. So to her, it felt like I was just twisting the knife by bragging about how great our sex was. She snapped, and somewhere between what I was saying and what she wanted to talk about some wires got crossed and she said something incredibly dumb. She left without saying goodbye because she was mortified and ashamed as well as irrationally mad at me. Something to know about Jess: she's an awful liar and she and I were the co-founders of our high school's Foot and Mouth Society, so I do believe her. I told her I forgave her and said I'm sorry I didn't realize she wanted to talk about something bothering her, and she said I was too stupidly nice and have nothing to apologize for, so I think we'll be okay. For the time being, I'm not ready for her and Mike to meet, because I don't want to make things feel worse, and she agrees. But she's really happy for me. Hopefully, this is just a funny story we can look back on someday. So, on to how Mike almost killed me, lol. Last night we were talking about the Reddit post, and he gets this funny expression that I'm starting to recognize. And he goes, "How do we know you don't have a fetish if we haven't at least tried it in the chair?" And I'm like, "Are you serious, lol?" He said he's never attempted it, because, cute ears, he's never felt so comfortable with a partner before. Well, his chair has what is essentially like a parking brake thing. Or it should. It's unfortunately broken and apparently getting them fixed is an expensive pain in the ass. He doesn't use it that often, so he hasn't made it a priority. And there's this thing called Newton's third law, you know how every action has an equal and opposite reaction? As it happens, when you're trying to, get the motion of the ocean, going in a chair with wheels that aren't locked, there's a sort of counter motion that starts and messes it all up. So we were going nowhere fast except for inching along the floor in his bedroom. And laughing at the silliness, which isn't helping. Eventually, he just stops and says, "Maybe we can get some of those wooden block things they use to keep little planes from rolling away, like in Indiana Jones, you know?" I absolutely lost it. Like laughing so hard I'm in tears. He's giggling half at the situation and half at my reaction, and everything just keeps setting me off again. Finally, I get it under control, doing some deep breathing exercises, and I look at him again. And he pulls the straightest face he can, and says, "Golly, this sure is uncomfortable." Folks, if I had asthma, I would have died right there. I laughed so hard I think I pulled a rib. Like wheezing and not even laughing anymore so much as weeping and making this awful noise when I could catch my breath. While he's laughing and rubbing my back and saying he's sorry, he couldn't resist. So yeah, confirmed, no fetish here, and this magnificent bastard's comedic timing might actually kill me. I doubt I'll update again, because there's really nothing I can see needing to share given everything's sort of worked out. And in the end, the real assholes were the friends we made along the way? I don't know. Thanks for all the lovely comments on my last post and for coming along with me on this absurd but brief drama in my life. Update 2, May 13, 2024. Hello again. I was going to post this on my own page, but a few people mentioned that they think it's nice to read on Am I the Asshole, so screw it. Here's the Met Mike's family update. And it's a doozy, or at least felt like it at the time for a girl who grew up with a small, dysfunctional family. So first up, you know what people, at least me, don't think about when dating a guy who's always sitting? Height. I know he's taller than me because we cuddle a lot, and he's taller sitting on the couch, but I didn't really get it. So we drive up Friday night after work in his vehicle, which is modified to be driven entirely using his hands. Neat, right? He's a really good driver too. One more green flag. We get to the house, and it's huge, you guys, like not a mansion, just kind of a sprawling one-floor rancher. Real estate was wild back in the day. Anyway, we get out, and I meet his mom. I'd like to point out I am no slouch, I'm 5'7". His mom is towering over me. But she was the nicest lady ever. We go inside and I meet his dad, who funny enough is apparently the only short one in this family, and his youngest sister, who is living there with his 1-year-old niece. She gets up to hug me and she is also really tall. It's already a bit late then, so we eat and head to bed. I get to see his cute room from when he was a teenager, and I casually ask, "Hey, so I don't know how this works and stuff, but how tall are you?" And Mike is all, "I don't know, like a bit over 6'4", been a while since I checked. A bit over 6'4". We met the Nordic basketball team he calls a family properly the next day. Actually, they're Irish, but they're blonde and tall, so it conveys the idea better. The only one of reasonable height, and still taller than me, was his oldest sister, lol. They are also loud. Like not really shouting or anything usually, just present. Mike is a lot different around them, but in the cutest way, like he just beams all the time, and you can see how happy he is to be home. One of his brothers put him in a headlock and gave him a dang nogie as a greeting, and got elbowed in the side for it, and all of them laughing. And his mom smacked one of his brothers with a rolled-up magazine for putting his feet on the table. More laughing. Just intimidating, but in the happiest way imaginable. I'll admit I was a little shut down for a bit, but Mike kept checking in with me to make sure I was okay, and they were all really nice, so I got into the spirit after a bit. I mentioned this in another comment, but Mike has a special sports wheelchair he uses for, well, sports. And he and his siblings play basketball. And he is good. Apart from just having a hell of an arm, he's quick as hell. And this magnificent bastard that I love will absolutely, purposefully, gleefully run someone's toes over. He aims for it. They all have this yank back the foot maneuver that's hysterical to watch. So it was this crazy day of loud people playing and having a blast, nieces and nephews running around, and just noise. My ears are still ringing. They also have a pool. It's a bit chilly still, but the pool is heated, so we actually all got to swim, which was a lot of fun because I got to show off that I too am athletic. I can do a backwards somersault off a diving board. Yeah. I'm a real catch, lol. They at least pretended to be impressed. We all stayed up late drinking and talking that it was too overcast to see the aurora, and I had the worst hangover I've had in a while on Sunday. We slept in a bit late, and then joined Mike's family for the barbecue part of the barbecue weekend. His dad can grill. And he's fast, food coming off the grill at lightning speed. I asked Mike about it and he laughed and said, "There was 7 of us to feed. Ever see a nest of baby birds?" He had practice. Which, fair enough. I don't have much experience with babies, but I got to hold his youngest niece, and we had a light talk about kids in the future. I told him that I never put much thought into it, but if they were going to grow up in a happy home like his and not how I grew up, I'm pretty sure I'd be open to having them with him someday. But later. I need him all to myself for a while first. He seemed really happy about that, which makes me feel all goofy and happy. I'm sappy. We had to drive home Sunday night, but before we went his mom hugged me and said she's never seen her son like this, and thanked me for taking good care of her baby. And asked if we'd be back for the 4th of July or if we were doing something with my family. And I tried to be all, "No, we'll be here if you don't mind, I don't see them much," and I think she caught on that there's more to the story, so she just hugged the crap out of me, and told me she can't wait to see me again. My ears are still ringing from all the noise and chaos, but it was an absolute blast, and I can't wait to see them again in July. Also, pretty much sure Mike is the man I'm going to marry. I literally can't think of a single reason why I would ever let him get away. Anyway, thanks for reading, hope you all had a lovely weekend, and those of you who got to see the aurora, I'm happy for you, but you suck. Story 2. Am I the asshole for breaking my fiancé's family tradition by naming my son what I wanted? Original post, April 16, 2023. Throwaway because I have in-laws on Reddit. I, 25 female, and my fiancé, 27 male, have a 2-month-old son. We are overjoyed at being parents, but most of my in-laws are refusing to even see our baby because of a decision we made concerning his name. My in-laws have a tradition of giving the firstborn son of every generation the same name. Let's say it's Peter. This has been going on for about 7 generations already, and they're very serious about it. My fiancé's eldest cousin was the latest person to get named Peter. Every one of his cousins has only had daughters so far, so our baby is the first son of his generation, and consequently should get the name. I have no problem with the name Peter, and would have been okay with naming my son that. Unfortunately, that was also the name of my uncle, who died before I was born. I won't get into details, but it was tragic and traumatizing for my family. My father never got over losing his younger brother. My grandmother asked the family not to name any of our future children Peter during her lifetime. My mother-in-law and father-in-law knew about this promise, and at first seemed to not only be okay with us avoiding the name Peter, but also supportive of the one we chose. However, My grandmother sadly passed away when I was 7 months pregnant. We traveled for her funeral. On our last days there, my in-laws called to offer me their condolences. Then my mother-in-law asked me if I was willing to think about the name Peter now. Suddenly, they were insistent that the name we chose was awful and we had to honor their tradition. According to them, they had only agreed to make an exception for us for my grandmother's sake, and had no obligation to keep it now that she had passed. My family agrees that while it's true we don't have to avoid the name anymore, it still doesn't feel right to use it. My fiancé agrees with me as well, but his parents spent the last weeks of my pregnancy trying to convince us to change our minds about the name. When our baby was born and we named him what we wanted, my in-laws were furious that we had broken a 7-generation-old family tradition. Some of them hadn't previously wanted to name their sons Peter, but did it anyway for the family's sake. They said our decision was selfish, and that my family should have moved on by now. This has truly nothing to do with whether my family has moved on or not, it just felt like a betrayal to my grandmother and uncle's memories to even consider using the name. My father-in-law offered us $1,000 to change our son's name to Peter after he was born. That was 2 months ago, and neither of my fiancé's parents have met the baby or seen us since I was pregnant. Most of my in-laws are on their side, and this is causing a huge rift between my fiancé and his family. He assures me he's fine, but I'm starting to feel really guilty about this. Am I the asshole? Edit. The tradition started, as far as I know, when original Peter died and his son, also named Peter, named his firstborn after his father. Peter III ended up having the first son of the following generation, and did the same thing. That one died before having children, so his sister gave the name to her son, and so on. The name is very common in my country, so none of them ever got bullied over it, and the fact that it was also my uncle's name isn't as unlikely as one might think. Also, middle names aren't used in my country. Most people get the maternal surname before the paternal one instead. Edit 2, it wasn't $1,000. Different country, different currency. It's still a lot of money, but would probably translate to about $200 USD. Relevant comments. Comment 1, can you use Peter as a middle name? OP, our country doesn't generally use middle names. If we did, I'd be willing to think about that, even though my son's name doesn't match. Comment 2, how many Peters are alive right now in your family? OP, there are 3 living Peters in the family right now. Only the eldest, my fiancé's great-uncle, actually goes by Peter. The other 2 have nicknames. Update 1, May 24, 2023, over 1 month later. Thank you so much to everyone who commented and offered support. A lot has happened since I posted, so I thought I'd give you an update. About a week after my post, my fiancé's parents contacted us. They apologized for their behavior, and begged to meet my son. They said they were ready to leave the naming debacle behind and truly wanted to be involved in their grandson's life. We were skeptical, but invited them over to meet the baby. The visit went well. They began coming over almost every day during the next 3 weeks. I noticed neither of them ever called my son by his name, but I didn't point it out. For the first time in months, things seemed good between my fiancé and his parents. One day, my fiancé was helping my father-in-law with something at our place, so my mother-in-law and I went to the park with my baby. Sometime later, I had to go to the bathroom, so I left him in the stroller with her. When I got back, she was sitting on a park bench, chatting with a woman who was cooing over my son. I went over there and introduced myself as my son's name's mom, and she said, I thought his name was Peter. I didn't say a word, and neither did my mother-in-law. She followed me to the car, and we went back to my apartment. On the way there, I texted my fiancé about what had happened. The moment we got there, he kicked both his parents out of our place. He'd read my texts and confronted his father. Thankfully, my father-in-law is a terrible liar, and confessed immediately. Apparently, both my in-laws only call my son Peter. That includes whenever they're talking about him, every time they introduce him to someone else, and even baby talking to him on the few occasions they were left alone with him. Neither of them are embarrassed by this, and they both think they're in the right. We're heartbroken. Especially my fiancé. Not only because his parents can't let go of their pride, but also because the name we chose for our son means a lot to us both. I blame myself for encouraging my fiancé to allow them near our son. I was raised in a different city than all my grandparents, and always wished they could have been more involved in my life. Losing my grandmother didn't help. Pretty much every doubt I had only existed because I thought it would be important for my son to grow up with all of his grandparents around. But now, all my guilt is gone. If they can't respect my son enough to call him by his name, they don't deserve to be in his life. I hope they enjoyed the 3 weeks they had with their grandson. because that's all they're getting until they get their heads out of their asses. Edit, I thought I'd clarify some things. First of all, I'm not comfortable sharing my son's name here, but I promise it's not a weird name or anything like that. It's perfectly normal and popular-ish in our country. Secondly, I mentioned this in the comments, but while my family didn't try to dictate me on my son's name, they would never be comfortable with it. My Uncle Peter passed almost 3 decades ago, but it forever changed everyone who knew him. My grandmother's wish might seem a bit irrational, but it was motivated entirely by grief, and it didn't seem right to disrespect that just because she's not around anymore. And to whoever PM'd me that my fiancé's only on my side to keep the peace, he didn't want to use the name either. Months before I got pregnant, he told me he hoped one of his cousins would have a son before we did, because he always hated the tradition and sympathized with my family. He's just as angry at his parents as I am, if not more. Also, most of his cousins and some other relatives have come around and apologized. Relevant comments. Comment 1, are they this unhinged in other areas of your life too? OP, according to my fiancé, they've always been a little entitled, but I never really saw them enough to be able to say that. I will say that, though they were polite, they very clearly didn't care about me until we moved in together. My mother-in-law pretended not to remember my name every time she saw me, and my father-in-law would lose interest in any conversations that weren't about him. Once it was clear me and my fiancé were in for the long term, they started acting a lot more friendly towards me, but it never seemed sincere. Comment 2, have other family members come around yet? OP, most of my fiancé's cousins have come around, and his brother was always on our side. His grandmother and some of his aunts and uncles are with us too. His grandfather, divorced from his grandmother, 2 out of 3 living Peters, and pretty much everyone else are either still mad at us or haven't reached out to talk about it yet. My entire family is on my side. They promised not to interfere in the naming process, but are relieved we didn't name him Peter. Update 2, July 28, 2023, 3 months from first post. My son is now 5 months old. We're still no contact with my fiancé's parents, who haven't seen us since May. We've both blocked them everywhere. His relatives who were on our side still are, and most of the ones who weren't haven't come around. If anything, they're even more pissed now. I remember someone suggesting that my fiancé's family might stop using the name after we decided not to. Well, you were right. Last week, one of my fiancé's cousins announced she was pregnant with a boy. She included her baby's name in the announcement, and it's not Peter. What followed was a string of aggressive Instagram DMs from both mother-in-law and father-in-law. They both created accounts for the sole purpose of contacting me. I didn't see them until 2 days later. They sent me almost an hour's worth of voice messages about how I'd ruined their family. They wish their son had never met me, that he'd see me for who I truly am, and that I'd never gotten pregnant. Many of the messages ended with, "I hope you're happy now," as if they thought they were getting the last word, only to think of something else they wanted to say. There was name-calling, an accusation of me cheating, and the persistent refusal to refer to my son as their grandchild. My fiancé and I listened to the messages together. He hadn't gotten any. As much as I tried to distance myself, I was in tears by the time it was all done. I still don't regret anything, especially after the stunt they pulled back in May, but I'm not completely free of the guilt yet. Not to mention their complete disregard for their grandson. I was already having an overwhelming week, and this just seemed like the final straw. I must have spent close to an hour sobbing in my fiancé's arms. Once I was calmer, he unblocked his parents just to scream at them for a while. I only heard his side of the conversation, but it was more than enough. He finished the call by saying he didn't want to hear from them again. We had a long talk afterwards. My fiancé opened up about the emotional blackmail by his family before and after my pregnancy. My in-laws were close to threatening him with anything they could if we didn't name our son Peter. I told him about my guilt, and how awful I feel for putting him through this. We reassured each other, cried a bit more, and had a mostly pleasant evening with our baby. We contacted his cousin. The family is giving her shit for breaking the tradition again. They're being way less aggressive though, and I think many of my in-laws are finally learning to let go. We're not expecting any apologies anytime soon, but we'll be glad if they come. Our wedding will be in September 2024, and whoever doesn't give us a sincere apology until then is uninvited. My fiancé's parents are banned either way. We came to the decision together. Also, I'd like to address some comments on my previous update about how I was letting my family's trauma win, or how the name wouldn't be hurtful now that my grandmother has passed. I can't stress enough the damage my uncle's death caused. He was only 30 years old. He had a fiancée, a great career, and his whole life ahead of him. I don't know many details about what happened, because I didn't want to upset my family by asking. My grandmother wasn't the only person hurt by this, my entire paternal family was. And if I remember correctly, the person responsible isn't even in jail anymore. It was more than 20 years ago, but the wound never truly closed. So yeah, I think it's safe to say the tradition is over. The next Not Peter will be here in January, right before my son's first birthday. It was never my intention for this to turn into such a big deal, but I'm so incredibly proud of my little family. Thank you so much to everyone who shared their stories and offered advice during these last few months. I'll be forever grateful for all the support I got from you all. Update 3, May 13, 2024, 13 months from original post. Hey everyone, it's been a while. I hope you guys had a great Mother's Day. I remember that last year, I promised myself I'd write a final update as soon as I felt calmer or felt the situation was closer to being solved. That actually happened months ago, but I've been busy lately. Following my previous update, my fiancé's side of the family remained upset about the tradition being over for a few more months. They were way less intense about it, especially with the pregnant cousin I mentioned, but it was still evident. That cousin's Not Peter was born in January. Our son turned 1 the next month. I think the fact that these two things happened so close together helped many of my in-laws let go of the tradition. We got a few apologies we weren't expecting. Some of them were sincere enough that we slowly started re-establishing contact. My fiancé's parents were not among those who apologized. We haven't spoken to either of them since last July. From what I've heard from some of his other relatives, however, mother-in-law seems regretful. She has told some of them that she wishes she could be part of her grandson's life, and wonders if making his name a hill to die on was a bad decision. Father-in-law, from what I gather, barely acknowledges my baby exists. My fiancé knows about how his mother feels, but he says he doesn't care. And even if we did get an apology, I don't think either of us can forgive his parents. As much as we're mostly okay now, it sometimes feels like their treatment of our family ruined the first few months of our baby's life. I know that's not actually true, but I don't want them around my child. Besides all that, things have been great. My son is 15 months old now, which I don't think I'll ever really get used to. He recently started drawing and has been expanding his vocabulary. My fiancé and I are still getting married in September. We're thinking about moving abroad in a couple of years, but we're not sure yet. We also recently got a dog. This will be my final update. Whatever guilt I had about this situation a year ago is completely gone, and my life has been peaceful enough that it feels safe to say the show is over. Thank you, Reddit, for all the love, advice, and support you've given me this past year. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Whilst this may be your final update on the naming sage, you said you are getting married in September 2024 and mother-in-law and father-in-law aren't going to be invited. Prepare for more craziness from them at that time and good luck. OP, I really do think this is over. My fiancé's parents don't know when or where we're getting married, so I'm not worried about them showing up. They haven't reached out to us in months, and we have no interest in contacting them. Comment 2, should have named the dog Peter, and giggled every time you called it. OP, if it wasn't also my late uncle's name, I'd definitely consider it haha. All this over a name? Like I kind of get the whole tradition thing, but like it's not that serious. Also, I greatly enjoy calling the babies in this story Not Peter. Anyway, I am glad OP's fiancé supports her and her family's decision. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next video.